So would somebody read that section in the book? It's verses 9 through 13 and 22 through 23.
I'll read it.
Okay.
As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus gave them strict injunctions. Tell no man about the vision until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. The disciples asked him, "Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" He answered, "It is true that they say that Elijah is to come and will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but they did to him what they wished. So also the Son of Man is to suffer at their hands." So then the disciples understood that he spoke to them about John the Baptizer. When they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised." And they were exceedingly distressed.
Okay, and this is yet again another time where Jesus is saying, keep this a secret. And Barkley is explaining that that there's potential danger in letting the word get out if people think he's the Messiah, because they still are looking for a military Messiah. They still think that that word goes with power. And so if people are expecting that and spreading the wrong word is worse than spreading no word at all at this point. So they're supposed to keep their mouths shut. And my impression of Peter is that that's probably something hard for him to do. You know something great, you want to share it. And I'm reading, this is from Barkley. The idea was that Elijah would be a great and terrible reformer who would walk throughout the world destroying all evil and setting things to rights. And the result was that both the forerunner and the Messiah were thought to be in terms of power. So they thought Elijah was going to come clean up everything, get rid of evil, and the Messiah would come with his power and rule, and everything would be wonderful forever.
Good cop, bad cop.
It's an interesting take on it.
So do we think that Jesus ever said that that's what he was going to do, that his being on earth was going to eliminate evil? Oh, you muted, Claire. We missed you.
I think he stressed, though, that he had already overcome evil. That, there is evil in the world, but don't be afraid because I have already conquered it. But I don't think that's the same as eliminating evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh no, that's because I'm sitting here thinking about Bart Ehrman.
Mm-hmm.
And I read something that he wrote. I know at one point, somebody in our Sunday school class made the statement that it was a shame that his intellectual pursuits had taken him away from God, because that's how it sounded I think with the first book that we did. But I read something he wrote later that said that wasn't what happened to him. The reason he turned from God was because of all the suffering he saw, and that he just cannot understand how a God of love allows the amount and the severity of suffering that we all see every day. So I'm kind of, and some of the suffering that Ehrman was talking about might be due to natural causes, like what the earthquake in Haiti, and but also, looking at how people treat people, with the human trafficking. How does God let that happen?
as we see Kabul is being overrun by the Taliban.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and to see COVID running rampant when we have tools to keep it under reasonable control.
Yeah.
So the choices that we are given the tools and the choice of whether or not we use those tools. It's sort of where I've come to that. Jesus said, you know, the poor have always been with you and they always will be.
Yeah.
I just keep coming back to the concept that even with the suffering that I see such a small part of the world. So only God sees everything. And that's why I have to go with He is in control and there's a reason why this is happening the way it is.
Mm. Hmm. Well, Sarah, we got 30 more minutes now.
I'm thinking about what Claire said, and I'm thinking that can be a very comforting thought. And it can also be a very frustrating thought.
Mhm.
I'll go with the comforting side. So this is something I actually, before men and women could preach Christ, they must know who and what Christ was. And until Jesus had taught his followers the necessity of the cross, they had to be silent and to learn. It's not our ideas, it is Christ's message that we must bring to others. And we cannot teach others until Jesus Christ has taught us. So that was Barkley at the very end of that section. So Jesus is still teaching. And as we go through this, we watch the disciples and especially Peter, because just very recently he has had the light bulb moment. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. So the disciples are coming around. They're slow, but so are we. Okay, would somebody read verses 14 through 20?
I'll do that.
Okay.
When they came to the crowd, a man came to him and fell at his feet and said, "Sir, have pity on my son, for he is an epileptic and he suffers severely. For often he falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they were not able to cure him." Jesus answered, "O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me." And Jesus spoke sternly to him, and the demon came out of him, and the boy was cured from that hour. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and said, "Why were we not able to cast out the demon?" Jesus said to them, "Because of the littleness of your faith. This is the truth I tell you. If you have your faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Be moved from here,' and it will remove. So nothing will be impossible to you."
Okay. There's a lot in here.
Mhm. This is a hard one.
Yeah. Barkley says that the epileptic son, the word that the Greek word actually means to be moonstruck. And of course, they thought that was indication of evil spirits. So Barkley has four big things in this story. So the first one is to be impressed by the faith of the father. He has brought the boy to the disciples. The disciples can't do anything, but the father does not lose faith. He's basically in his head, I expect he's saying, I don't know what's wrong with these guys. I want Jesus. Jesus can do this. And so as soon as Jesus comes down, he doesn't have a minute to, doesn't get a minute's rest. he comes down and the father is immediately there, help me. And Barkley compares this to today's people, or at least the people of his day, and I think this is even more true today, people who have lost any, faith is not the right word, but, organized religion just doesn't cut it, but they believe in God, they believe in Jesus.
But have lost faith in the church.
Yeah. And his last sentence in this particular section says, it is at once our condemnation and our challenge that even now, though many have lost their faith in the church, they've never lost a wistful faith in Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we see that reflected, and this is a good sign, in that there are congregations, small congregations popping up in non-traditional places, like the one that Dee Dresick is a member of, that meets in a bar, I think.
Well, she's not part of that church anymore, but
Okay. But the point is, there's a church that meets in a bar.
there are, and theology on tap is what some folks call it. I know Bethany Christian Church, the one over on Forest Hill, they have a pretty active theology on tap, and so does 7th Street. So where they meet for a beer and have a discussion about faith and Christianity and God, and yeah.
My next door neighbor is a member of a new church starting that meets in a funeral home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. So and I think that's how Christianity is probably going to survive, as being
Flexible.
flexible and creative and responsive to needs. Like 7th Street took out, they have a big sanctuary, and for the return from COVID, they took out the front third of their pews and just have chairs sitting in a circle now for worship.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I was talking to David about this a little bit, and that's what I feel like. Well, one, it was a discussion about what we're doing right now via Zoom, but I think we need to keep that up, because Claire is currently in Tennessee, Jerry's in Florida, there are other people.
Have people from California and Texas. And
Attempts at starting a church somewhere, and it's been so problematic and generally failed. And I think we've already started another version of the church. We have, like another sort of congregation number 2 or whatever you want to call it. It serves a very important purpose, and I think we grow that and keep the best of both worlds.
And going along that train of thought, and I know Cindy does plan on continuing with the worship, but if we want to continue Sunday school on Zoom, we need to let the church office know, because when I logged in this morning, I noticed that the last scheduled Sunday school class was September 5th.
Well, they probably just couldn't schedule it beyond that. Well, we
Well, I
probably
think part of it is that Cindy expects us to be back to normal the Sunday after Labor Day.
I'm not coming back to normal the Sunday after Labor Day.
Right, I'm not planning to either.
No, the COVID numbers are too high, and I'll see David tomorrow, and I have I'll be glad to. So I want to, as far as what the consensus of this group, when we were a smaller group today, but the sense that I've had is that we're all continuing to be cautious, and
Yeah.
So am I.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I'm, in May, I was all optimistic and happy and bouncing off the walls because we were coming out of this thing. And I feel like we are just
Right.
going straight, back to it. And,
And we're
I keep in touch with someone who lives in Australia, and they are in a severe lockdown now.
My
So-
friend too is going crazy. She keeps saying, how have you done this so long?
Yeah, so I think that as much as I want it to be like it was in May, I'm just looking at this as, no, I think we're gonna have to reevaluate this 3 months from now.
And I think that's what we planned on doing, is we're going to see how it was, and then possibly when the new church Sunday school season started, we were thinking of seeing if we go back then, but then I don't think that we should. I think that we just should continue just like we are.
Well, we're on the edge of a lot of time-dependent things in preparation for a concert in October. And, we're thinking, how can we possibly have the food festival that we provide
So
in this climate? So as much as we want to do it, and we still haven't pulled the plug, but it's not looking very favorable.
We'll probably pull the plug on a concert this year.
You do it
Oh,
outside.
with school starting, it's probably gonna get worse for a while. And then we've got cold weather with
Right.
everybody's going back inside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Do it with the food thing that Susan does, and we're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
no, that makes sense to me, because I can only begin to imagine the amount of work that you and Susan do for this. And
Yeah.
But I've ordered 25 pounds of chocolate.
Yeah. And they've already got these cards printed.
No, I don't think we're gonna do it this year.
Yeah, chocolate keeps forever.
Yeah, I'll just make a lot of chocolate and give it away for Christmas.
Right, because the ultimate goal is that we win, not the virus.
That's right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
Okay, back to the second piece of this. Barkley talks about Jesus and his patience. It says the most Christ-like people in the world are those who never find other people a nuisance. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm way, way, way down on that list.
Me too.
A real eye-opener for me is reading some of Thomas Merton's diary and Mother Teresa, both, who are viewed as being such saintly and highly spiritual people. And Thomas Merton, I just couldn't help but laugh when I was reading one of his diaries, and he was really moaning and groaning about some of the other monks and how they behaved during prayers and how they talked and what they did. And Mother Teresa, I read one of hers that talked about being really frustrated with other people.
I feel better now, Kathy. Thank you.
Well, it gave me tremendous comfort, when I
before
read those.
spiritual, I think he was a bit wild himself.
Oh, he was. Oh my gosh, yeah. When he was younger, and he still would. He loved.
Yeah.
Huh?
Depends on where you check the oil and what date,
Well, no. Even after he became a monk, he would leave Gethsemane, the monastery where he lived, and go down the road to the bar and hang out down there.
Well, Jesus wasn't.
So yeah, Jesus, drank wine at the weddings,
Already.
Yeah, Jesus was with the regular people. He didn't.
Yes. Yes.
Bar was his mission field.
Yes.
He probably bought a round or two in his time.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. I think so. You remember, we're old enough, remember that painting of Jesus that got published in Playboy? I was in high school when it came out. And so this was the early 70s. And he just was laughing. It's just a big belly. Do any of you remember that? I haven't talked to these friends in years. He probably still has it. But it was just as big, like somebody told the best dirty joke ever. And he just was hee-hawing laughing. And that, I loved it. because that, Jesus was fully human and fully divine. And so if you're fully human, you're going to have a belly laugh at a really good joke.
Yeah.
So he's not going to sit around with his hands like this all the time, staring up at God,
Yeah, because God obviously had a sense of humor. All you have to do is look at the ostrich.
And
You
the
know, that's not a
anteater
sense-
and the armadillo.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just look around nature, And I mean, we've got a sense of humor. We wouldn't have a sense of humor, if God hadn't given it to us.
Right. Right. The other day, a dragonfly landed on me. That part of it was the color of Claire's shirt. It was this incredible, brilliant blue. And I was like, I don't even think I could find fabric that color. It was just beautiful. So, and then a red one came, and so it was just incredible. But yeah, so anyhow, Sarah, we digress.
Hey, digression is what it's all about here. And so what I was thinking about when I was reading this piece was, the hermits that would, the mystics that would go out and be alone. And
Because Thomas Merton did that too.
yeah, but Barkley says, but that is not religion. That is escapism. Real religion is to rise from our knees before God to meet other people and the problems of the human situation. Real religion, and I really like this. I'm gonna read the whole paragraph because I like this a lot.
Which page is you on? Oh, I see, I found it.
Yeah, top of 195. Real religion is to draw strength from God in order to give it to others. Real religion involves meeting God in the secret place and men and women in the marketplace. So you're the bridge between the two. Real religion means taking our own needs to God, not that we may have peace and quiet and undisturbed comfort, but that we may be enabled graciously, effectively, and powerfully to meet the needs of others. The wings of the dove are not for Christians who would follow their master in going about doing good.
Well, two thoughts come to mind. First, I was wondering how Barkley reconciles Jesus going off by himself for 40 days and 40 nights and all that.
Mhm.
What was the other thought there?
Well,
I lost the other thought.
yeah, I think you do have to have those quiet moments to get strength and to pray. And that's usually what Jesus did, was to get away, to reconnect, but that immediately usually when he comes back, he is doing some kind of service, to someone. He's helping, he's healing, he's,
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things here. And I guess what Barkley's talking about are the spiritual people who go off by themselves, period, and never come back,
Right.
basically. And that, to me, what little I know of that, seems like troubled souls. And the people who Jesus included, who go off for some period of time, reflect and pray and recharge and come back and then do something, is different. But going off by yourself and contemplating your navel for the rest of your life is not serving a whole lot, I think.
and I think life on earth, and just physical life, it has sadness and death and bad things happen, like we were talking about earlier. And what in the kingdom that Jesus is talking about, it's where all of the people, even though things happen bad, that we all do what we can to serve those near us, that we try to make things better for the people in this bad situation. Whether it's a telephone call or fixing food or whatever, that we somehow serve rather than being the problem. We had one person who came to work on our house once, that doing our kitchen design. He says, I'm a problem solver, I'm not a problem maker. Well, he was more of a problem maker than I've ever had around here. But that's, I think the kingdom is, we're here to help ease, and be servants. to other people. So things are going to be bad and bad things are going to happen, but it's us, we're responsible for trying to see what we can do to make things better for people.
In the little bit that I've continued to follow with monastic orders and stuff, and start going back first to Thomas Merton, because he did spend I think it was about 1.5 years or 2 years living as a hermit. But he was in a lot of correspondence with other people during that time. And his writings from that time have served to minister to a lot of people. But I think from what I see, it seems like even in monastic orders now, if someone feels like they are called to live that life of isolation, that there's also the direction with them, spiritual direction, to look at, well, what is the purpose in doing that? What is going to come out of that for God's ministry, in the world? What are you going to do with that? So,
Cake.
Huh?
Cake.
Yeah, brew beer and make fruit cake.
Right, but there's not many monasteries now or convents that truly live cloistered lives anymore. Yosemite has become, where Thomas Merton lived, has become a major retreat center for men and women. On a constant basis, Holy Cross Abbey up in Berryville that Sarah and I have been to, their retreat house is packed full. You've got to book now. I've looked a couple of times, and you have to book well in advance to get in there. And the monks are readily available to meet with folks. And so that whole cloister and separation from the world definition is changing. Anyhow.
Yep.
So Barkley, when he gets on his criticism about hermits, I get on, that doesn't sit well with me. So, because I see it from a different perspective than he does. But
Right, and part of it, how long ago did he write this book?
in the 50s.
Yeah,
early
so
50s.
it's been 60 to 70 years, and so that shift, I think that shift has happened in that time frame.
Right, and there, the contrast between Protestants and Catholics in the British Isles is, there's a long history there, and how much that influenced Barkley too, I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
But
so moving on to the healing of the epileptic son.
Yeah. Well, the third thing that Barkley talks about here, he says that we see the grief of Jesus here. And it's not that he wants to be rid of his disciples. There's nothing more Christ-like than patience. We mentioned that earlier. But I think what we see there is Barkley uses the word grief, and I'm thinking it sounds more like a frustrated teacher. How many times do I have to teach you this before you catch on? Having been there. And then the fourth item, we see here the central need of faith without which nothing can happen. And Jesus talks about moving mountains. And there's actually some background. The Jewish folks, a great teacher was known as an uprooter or a pulverizer of mountains. That to tear up, to uproot, to pulverize mountains were regular phrases for removing difficulties. So Jesus was not being literal. You can take that mountain and move it, but you can solve this problem. And if you have enough faith, faith makes removing any difficulty possible. And so it actually doesn't, okay, I think we beat that to death. Okay, next section, the temple tax. Unless anybody's got any other comments.
Oh.
Okay, verses 24 through 27. Can somebody read that?
I'll read it.
Okay.
and I get my new glasses tomorrow, which I will be very happy about. When they came to Capernaum, those who received the half shekel temple tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the tax?" Peter said, "He does pay it." When he had gone into the house, before he could speak, Jesus said to him, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do earthly kings take tax and tribute? From their sons or from strangers?" When he said, "From strangers," Jesus said to him, "So then the sons are free. But so as to not set a stumbling block in anyone's way, go to the sea and cast a hook into it and take the first fish which comes up. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take it and give it to them for me and for you." All right, so why did Jesus call Peter Simon? Anyhow, wonder why Matthew did that. So, all right, sorry, Sarah.
Okay. The temple, and this was a real eye-opener for me. I mean, I understand that running a temple the size of that one would be expensive, but Barkley runs through the list of all the things that happened at the temple that had to be supported by this tax. Morning and evening, they sacrificed a lamb. And then you've got, they also offered wine and flour and oil. You had incense, you had expensive robes that the priest wore. And so this tax was to support all of that. And it's the equivalent, they say it's 2 days worth of earnings. So it's the equivalent of okay, I did that wrong. I did some math and it was wrong, so I'll shut up about the math. I can't believe I made that mistake. But anyway, 2 days earnings is not a huge amount. And it's based on Exodus 30:13, where it was laid down that every male Jew over 20 years of age must pay an annual temple tax of half a shekel. And at one point it went down to a third of a shekel when things got really, really bad. And they very carefully organized, I'm thinking the IRS here, they very carefully organized the collection of the tax for the first of the month of Adar, which is equivalent to our month of March. They have 2 weeks and there are booths set up where you go pay your tax. And if you're late paying your tax, you have to go pay it at the temple. So, you know, there's a penalty. You got to travel further if you don't pay it on time. And so.
Yeah, because they're in Capernaum, which I just looked up, and Capernaum is on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. So,
Yeah, so it's a pretty serious journey if you don't pay it where you can. To have to walk all the way down to Jerusalem would be a problem. And he goes on and points out, and I think in America we have trouble with this idea because it's so far removed from the way we live, that in that day and time, in that place, and it still exists in places today, where the rulers believe that the people exist to support the rulers. And so taxes are expected, you know, your existence is to help us live a better life from the people at the top of the heap.
Wait, so that's different from today, how?
We at least have one small voice the first Tuesday in November. Yeah. Yeah, you got me tickled, Claire. And so then he goes on and also say the picture is probably much simpler, that the king is not going to tax his own family. So why is God taxing his own family? But it was a necessity. And why would Jesus be under obligation? But this is where the really interesting stuff comes in. Jesus says, I'm going to do this to set the example. Because if people see me not paying this tax, then they're going to think that they don't have to pay this tax. And so I don't want to put a stumbling block in front of somebody. And they talk about, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So to put a stumbling block in somebody's way is to cause them to trip and fall. Therefore, Jesus is saying we must pay so as not to set a bad example. We must show others what they should do. So we all have obligations. There may sometimes be exemptions we can claim. Again, I'm thinking the tax code in this country. But we shouldn't do things that make a bad example to other people. And Barkley says, why select this story? Why did this story end up in the gospel? Because by the time Matthew wrote this, the temple had been destroyed, and so there was no temple tax. But the Romans had kind of taken over the idea of the temple tax, except they were using the money to support a Roman temple, which of course the Christians and the Jews would not have been real crazy about. Vespasian, the Roman emperor, passed a decree that the half shekel temple tax would now be paid to the treasury of the temple of Juniper in Rome. So that was indeed a problem, and many of the Jews were violently inclined to rebel. And so this story was put in the gospel, this is Barkley, to tell the Christians, especially Jewish Christians, that however unpleasant the duty of a citizen might be, they have to be shouldered. It tells us that Christianity and good citizenship go hand in hand. Christians who exempt themselves from the duties of good citizenship are not only failing in citizenship, they are also failing in Christianity.
Whoa.
Well, that's heavy.
And these days and times it is. Yeah. No, I think we are, as Christians, we are called to be good citizens wherever we are, whatever setting we are.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole section here reminds me, some of y'all know you remember Mary Kay Cyrus, and she had a drama group, and and I was part of that group. And the very first play she did was 20 years ago, because it was right after 9/11. And the name of the play was, This Is God, I Need You. And the premise of the play was that there were huge problems on earth that God was certainly capable of fixing, but that we were the hands and the feet and the mouths of God on earth, that we had it within our power to solve most of these problems if we would just get up and do it. So being a good citizen is part of being a good Christian, which a lot of people don't think about. Now on to the part about for Peter to go out and catch a fish, and he would find the gold coin in the fish's mouth. Probably shouldn't take this literally. Barkley says basically what Jesus is saying here is, just go out and do your job. You're a fisherman, go fish. If you're a seamstress, go sew something. If you're an accountant, go count something. Do your job. Don't laugh. Do your job, earn your money, and there's what you need to pay your temple tax. Right,
that you have to support yourself and take,
Right. You're expected to support yourself. It reminds me of, my upbringing that really was kind of extreme in some ways. My dad taught us that we were not to count on anybody else at all in any way, shape, or form, that we were expected to be totally, absolutely self-sufficient. And if you received a favor from somebody, you had an obligation to very quickly, as soon as you could, to repay that obligation. You were to be totally self-sufficient. I mean, it just was pounded into our heads figuratively. So Barkley makes the point that God does not send a miracle to enable us to do what we can quite well do ourselves. You know, if you're an able-bodied person and you can work, you go out and work. Don't expect God to do it for you. And so Jesus would not have done that. If this miracle is taken literally, there is a sense in which it might even be immoral. Life would become chaotic if people could pay their debts by finding coins in fish's mouths.
Yeah, well, the ponds and streams would be overfished.
Yeah, really, there'd be no fish left in the ocean.
I guess that's why we don't hear this story read much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand why Cindy follows the lectionary, because she has explained that imposes some discipline.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you skip some things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there are some passages that never show up in the lectionary. I don't understand why, but
Yeah.
that's interesting. This story is only in Matthew. It's not in Mark and Luke.
Yeah.
Well, and I like how Barclay talks about it's that this doing something like this was totally against what Jesus would normally do. That, when he was in the wilderness, he wouldn't, use his power to provide food for himself, or, he wouldn't use the miracles to do that kind of thing. And so it's just against what Jesus would normally do. So
Yeah.
he must have meant, in that case, he must have meant something else. It's just like earlier when it was confused when he said, in your lifetime, I will be coming back. Well, he didn't. So we must be misunderstanding what he said, or it would have happened that way, So this story just doesn't make sense as a literal story about a fish's mouth.
And we're just like the disciples. We misunderstand all over the place. I'm sitting here looking at starting the next section and seeing how little time we've got, and Tom's going, don't do it, don't do it.
That's wee small voice.
Yeah, see, he has an introduction to the whole chapter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so let me just do the introduction, and then we'll stop without going into the verses. Chapter 18. Let me go back and do a little bit. I went back and rewatched the Matthew in 8 minutes video. And if you haven't done it, you need to do it. And if you have done it, it's not a bad idea to watch it again. There are 5 great discourses in Matthew where Jesus does a lot of talking, and then there's stories. This chapter 18 is the 4th discourse. And this one is about how Christians are to live in community with each other, and how we're to treat each other, and how we're to behave. And this it's an important chapter for Christian ethics, because it does deal with our relationships. And he talks about, I think it's 4 different things here. Oh, sorry, 7. First and foremost, we will talk about humility. Then there's a quality of responsibility, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago. Self-renunciation, and he compares Christians to athletes who deny themselves as they train, going after what they want. Then there's individual care, where we realize that God cares for us individually, and we reflect that in our care for others. There is the quality of discipline. And kindness and forgiveness do not mean that those who are in error are to be, just given a pat on the back, that you're supposed to guide them. But the discipline is always to be given, and I want to read this to a lot of Christians that think otherwise, but discipline is always to be given in humble love and not in self-righteous condemnation. And how many Christians have done the self-righteous condemnation, when trying to correct others? And then there's the quality of fellowship. And people who are in fellowship seek the will of God. And then you have the spirit of forgiveness, and that we forgive our neighbors on the fact that we know that we are forgiven. They forgive others even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven them. Which is, of course, the hardest thing in the whole book.
So that means I have to forgive my neighbor that calls the police all the time.
I live next door to one of those, and yes, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Sarah, you touched on a couple of things there, and I don't know where I'm going, but it's something I really need to think about. You mentioned athletes in some way sacrificing things to meet a specific goal. So they deny a lot of things. And that started speaking to me of self-discipline. And then you mentioned the word discipline, and I was still on the self-discipline train of thought, but I realized you were also talking about disciplining somebody else. And I'm kind of wrestling around between those two things, where one stops and the other starts, or what's appropriate, or I don't know what I'm thinking about, but there's something about discipline and self-discipline that I need to meditate on a little bit.
Well, the self-discipline piece, Barkley says Christians are prepared to cut out of their own lives everything, and this is another hard one, everything which would keep them from rendering a perfect obedience to God.
Once knew a lady who told me she could give up everything except her vices.
I remember, I forget who, one member of the church, it must have been in Sunday school one time, but it was during thinking of Lent and what they were going to give up for Lent. And this one person in our Sunday school class says, I'm not giving something up for Lent. I've decided to do something for Lent. And I thought that's really a nice thing to consider.
Yeah.
When you give up something, it's like you're giving it up for your personal self, but when you decide to do something, then usually that's doing something for other people. So it's not denying yourself, it's giving of yourself. And I like that idea for Lent a lot better than saying giving up chocolate.
Right.
Not to be funny, but giving up something that is just something that, and maybe you're supposed to give something up to make yourself suffer, to prepare, for Jesus's suffering or whatever. But I really like the idea of doing something instead of giving up something.
Right. Well, it's 9:54.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, time to go to church.